I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics, messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for May the 22nd, 2025. Now, today, I know that many of you are deeply concerned and troubled by the two murders which took place in Washington, D.C., two Israelis, I believe, as a horrendous act of anti-Semitism. It's certainly been condemned already by people all over the world, and we'll be getting into that in our news roundup. And of course, more information is coming out by the hour. But this is a uncomfortable road sign regarding when we are. And we've been seeing these kinds of incidents on the rise since October the 7th, 2023, 19 months ago now. There's the ongoing situation between Israel and Gaza, the situation in Iran, and we also see among many apparent conservative Christian types just a wide-scale silence regarding matters of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. And of course, it's because of the plague of replacement theology. Now today, and our subject matter for the theology roundup was planned a few days ago, we're going to be talking about the terminology under the law, which in a great deal of popular Christianity is commonly approached as meaning having to observe or be obedient to the instructions of the Mosaic Torah. Yet, when you get into theological examination, you get into things which are a little more technical, you can quickly find out that that has not always been the case among more professional examiners. There is a variance of approaches seen regarding the terminology under the law. Now, if you have not already, please do go to the Outreach Israel bookstore, so outreachisraelbookstore.com. Get a copy of our ministry flagship publication, The New Testament Validates Torah. This edition with the greenish cover was updated just a little less than a year ago, so it's pretty up to date regarding not just the validity of the Torah, but also where the status of Torah is for the Messianic sphere of influence. So it goes into issues regarding how do you approach a Torah foundation, some of the developments which have taken place over the past 10 to 12 years, bilateral ecclesiology, people claiming that those who believe in some kind of significant validity of the Torah practice Torahism, what this whole pro-Nomian Christianity thing is. So new developments, which of course didn't exist a number of years ago. And then just how we need to be looking forward to other developments in the sphere of influence of Torah validity. So this is a resource. Get a copy for yourself. Get some copies for your local Messianic congregation, their library. I think you will definitely be blessed by it. Okay, so our discussion for today, our theological discussion, is on the terminology under the law. And the terminology under the law gets thrown around quite a bit. And not only in terms of theology, where people automatically assume that under the law means having to observe the Torah. And there are challenges which can be issued regarding whether that is even the correct way to approach it. But in our contemporary speech, for example, many of us use the terminology under the law. So, for example, you might hear the sentence used, under the law of the state of Texas, murderers can expect to be given the death penalty. We use the terminology frequently in common English speech, under the law, to really mean according to the law, or as defined by the law, or as expected by the law. So why can't we use some of those alternatives? According to the law of the state of Texas, murderers can expect to be given the death penalty. Now, of course, the only way one can actually know what the terminology under the law means in Holy Scripture is by going to those places where it appears. And the places where the terminology under the law legitimately appears is where the Greek source text will use the clause hopa nomen. There are places in various modern English versions, so the New American Standard, the Revised Standard Version, New Revised Standard, English Standard Version family, where you will see the terminology under the law used in various places where hopa nomen does not, in fact, appear. Now, if you go to the Messianic Apologetics website, click on the FAQs tab, and not FAQ Volume 2, but the FAQs tab. These are the entries 2000 to 2018. They're all listed in alphabetical order, so go all the way down to the letter U, near the bottom. Here you see under the law, click there and a PDF file will open up. This is short, but it's detailed. So the question, certainly our ministry has been asked for many years, how can today's Messianic movement widely advocate that the law of Moses is still valid when the Bible is clear that Christians are not under the law? Okay, I agree in principle that born-again believers are not under the law. But what does under the law actually mean? That is something which often doesn't get probed enough. Any person who believes in the final authority of the Holy Scriptures, Genesis to Revelation, will have to take the admonition, for you are not under law, but under grace, Romans 6:4, New American Standard, very seriously. For anyone who believes in the continued validity of the Torah or law of Moses in the post-resurrection era, to disregard something like this, or somehow claim that the Apostle Paul was wrong, would indicate that he or she does not hold to a very high view of the whole scriptural canon. There are various challenges present when approaching the issue of what, under the law, should be viewed as meaning, which too many of your average Bible readers are simply not aware of. Much of this has to do with the fact that being under the law in too much of contemporary modern speech has become synonymous with according to the law, whether such law is biblical or secular. When under the law terminology is witnessed in the scriptures, it is automatically assumed to mean according to the law or being obedient to the law. But does it really mean this? And few are aware that in various mainline English translations, like the New American Standard or Revised Standard Version, how there are a variance of Greek clauses rendered as under the law. Our ultimate appeal as Bible readers and examiners, as it pertains to what under the law really means, has to be made to the source text which sits behind our English translations. It would not only be too convenient, but even a bit haphazard for any of us to simply type in a few search criteria via some Bible software program for under law, and then conclude that the results include just the places where the Greek clause hopa nomen appears. The only places where under the law legitimately appears in the Bible are Romans 6:14, 15, 1 Corinthians 9:20, 4 times, Galatians 3:23, 4:4, 5:21, 5:18. Where an English version may employ under the law and something else actually appears in the source text, we need to carefully determine if something like in the law, by the law, or according to the law is used instead. While for many Bible readers, being under the law means being obedient to the Torah or law of Moses, few laypersons are actually aware of the fact that there are actually 3 main interpretations of under the law accessible to interpreters. Douglas J. Moo, who himself believes that obedience to the Torah was only a part of the pre-resurrection era, is quite fair in summarizing the 3 main options of what under the law could mean. Quote, "We do not presume that under the law must connote the same idea in each of its occurrences, although the stereotypical flavor of the phrase may point in this direction. 3 general meanings of the phrase are popular. 1, under the condemnation pronounced by the law. 2, under a legalistic perversion of the law. And 3, under the law as a regime or power in a general sense." Unquote. 5 views on law and gospel. Within a great deal of today's broad Messianic movement, in no small part due to the influence of David H. Stern's Complete Jewish Bible, under the law, meaning some kind of legalistic perversion of the Torah, has been a common view one will encounter. Ultimately, though, Bible readers have to recognize that the redeemed in Yeshua, not being under the law, has to serve as an appropriate counterpart to them being under grace. It is the viewpoint of Outreach Israel and Messianic Apologetics that under the law, being subjected to the condemnation pronounced by the Torah is actually the best way to view the clause hopa nomen in all of the locations where it appears within the Pauline letters. For it is quite obvious that those who have received Yeshua and his salvation into their lives are redeemed from the high penalties of the Torah, Colossians 2:14. Yet the Messiah himself bid his followers to follow Moses' teaching, Matthew 5:17 through 19. Being under the law, then, is a status in which unsaved persons will find themselves, not saved persons who know Yeshua as their personal Savior. Being under the law regards a condition of condemnation and punishment if not rectified, not the steadfast requirement that God's people obey his commandments and live in holiness. And of course, within our publication, The New Testament Validates Torah, we have an extensive article, What Does Under the Law Really Mean? A further study, which goes into those places where the terminology hopa nomen appears, as well as where various English versions have taken a liberty, and you might instead in the Greek see en namo, in the law, kata nomon, according to the law, things like that. So I hope that this helps answer some of your questions. I know that this is an issue which comes up periodically. We do have to address it. We do have to remind some people to be aware of how various English versions have taken some issues. All right, so that finishes up our theology roundup for today. We do the news roundup after the theology roundup because things in the news roundup are always time sensitive. And they change from day to day, of course. Now, when this episode is archived on MessianicApologetics.net, all the links will be available. They will be accessible, so you can go and access them yourself and read the different articles. Okay, our first news story. This is from Open Source Intel, yesterday, May the 21st. Breaking: Netanyahu, all areas of the Gaza Strip will be under Israeli security control. In the end, all parts of Gaza will be under Israeli control. Now, this is what Netanyahu, as Prime Minister of Israel, is saying. This is what he is asserting. Is it going to be what actually happens? How much of this is a point of rhetoric? How much of this is a point of negotiation? We want total control, but then later it ends up being somewhere in the middle between what Israel wants, what the demands of their neighbors are, what America, what Europe want. We know that things are very tense right now, and we also know that the Western powers, including people in our own U.S. government, after 19 months, October the 7th, 2023, patience is wearing very thin, even among pro-Israel supporters in the U.S. government. All right, from Instagram, and we talked about this a little yesterday. Yesterday it hit End Time headlines. UN conference in June will try to pressure Israel to accept two-state solution. A UN spokesperson said Friday that an international conference to revive the idea of a two-state solution to the Israel-Palestinian conflict will take place from June the 17th to 20th at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Hey, we'll see what happens. We know that, again, patience is wearing thin regarding the Israel-Hamas conflict. These kinds of things do come and go. We've seen a lot of conferences over the years. We've seen a lot of, hey, we need to have the two-state solution, going all the way back to even before the 1993 peace accord between Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat. These kinds of things can go forward, or they can be canceled, or they can even be just delayed. Also from Open Source Intel, Netanyahu's terms for ending the war. Full return of hostages. Hamas surrenders its weapons. Hamas leadership is exiled. Complete demilitarization of Gaza. Enforcement of the Trump plan. But what is the Trump plan? Is the Trump plan, I mean, that in and of itself changes. Is it Israel gets to have complete control over Gaza, or is it the United States comes in, redevelops the area as some kind of a freedom zone? I mean, so many things are in flux. So many things are not certain. Okay, our next story, and this is from My Charisma, and of course, My Charisma, whether you like charisma or not, they're one of the few places where pretty much all Messianic people will pay attention. So this kind of changes the subject. The real reason governments won't disclose UFOs. So issues regarding extraterrestrials, UFOs, Nephilim, Genesis 6, they're very live wire issues in the Messianic sphere of influence. So just to go through a few of the statements here. While some expect governments to reveal soon what they know, Stearman remains skeptical of any genuine transparency. I don't see disclosure in the classic sense happening, he says, suggesting that the truth is too deeply entangled with national interests and dark spiritual forces. The crux of the issue lies not in distant galaxies, but in earthly alliances. To disclose this dark presence that's been around literally for millennia would trip up the plans of too many world governments, whom I believe to be in league with these intruders. Okay, so various world governments, global entities have been involved with presumed extraterrestrials. The main conclusion here is Also speculates that reverse engineered alien technology may be behind recent advancements, but at a steep price. What was the price? The price was, I think, to give up certain control. It probably involves world economies, lines of force, power, human enslavement, and ultimately, in the plan of the Antichrist, the control of the entire population. These revelations point to a disturbing intersection between advanced technology, global power structures, and spiritual deception. What appears on the surface as scientific curiosity or extraterrestrial fascination may, in fact, be part of a far deeper and darker agenda. Now, is there an extraterrestrial component to the end time scenario? Well, in Matthew 24, in the Olivet Discourse, Yeshua did say that the days before his return would be like the days of Noah. And so many people make the connection with the Nephilim, the fallen angels of Genesis 6. And they think that a modern manifestation of the Nephilim, the fallen angels of Genesis 6, are UFOs, UAPs, extraterrestrials. And of course, that opens up a huge area of discussion, speculation, accuracy, and inaccuracy. What do you do about flying saucers? Have various world governments been involved with transdimensional beings? Have they been given technology? Are these fallen angels? Does God have possibly other stories playing out in the universe as part of the conflict between good and evil? These are the factors which play into all of this. And things are going to get more and more complicated as we get closer and closer to Yeshua's return. But along with that, we have to recognize that there are a lot of people out there in the world of faith, in the world of theology. They don't believe that in Genesis 6, fallen angels had relations with human females, producing a hybrid race of giants known as the Nephilim. They will often interpret that along the lines of aristocrats marrying commoners and society running amok. People who think along those lines regarding Genesis 6 and the Nephilim, they don't really have a strong position regarding what to do about these kinds of things. I guess they think it's all made up, that there's no at least kernel or nugget of some truth, or as the expression goes, where there's smoke, there's fire. The fact that people in the world of religion are talking about UFOs, extraterrestrials, many of them naturally connected to the Genesis 6 Nephilim, that's very important. We don't need to go off the chain. We don't need to go out of bounds with some of this discussion and embellish it. And, we've seen a lot of people who have, made their living off of the Nephilim, but we do need to pay attention seriously to some of this. And it is an issue which does matter for the future. Okay, so that's a nice little break. Back to open source intel. Hamas responds to Netanyahu. We will not surrender the weapons of the resistance and completely reject any demand to expel our leadership from Gaza. Netanyahu says something. Hamas says something again. The Europeans say something. The Americans say something. The local Arab powers say something. This goes back and forth, back and forth. And so, yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why, with Donald Trump proposing some of these, really massive things, his peace through strength and commerce, why people wonder, well, could he be the beast? Could he be paving the way for the beast? Talking about coming into Gaza and redeveloping it into a freedom zone. What's happening with his recent trip to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and then the United Arab Emirates? The speculation is rampant. And along with that, you can expect to hear conflicting reports on the media regarding the relationship of the Trump administration to the Netanyahu government. Trump to Benjamin Netanyahu 10 days ago. Bibi, I want you to know that I have an absolute commitment to you and to the state of Israel. The media lied, claiming that there were rifts in the relationship. Now, I don't doubt the fact that there are disagreements and perhaps even strong disagreements on various aspects of the peace process, what to do about Hamas, what to do about Iran. That is only natural. You know, allies and partners will have disagreements. But is there this huge rupture as was reported in some media outlets? Now, again, if at the present there may not be a huge rupture, that doesn't mean there's not going to be a huge rupture down the road with the Trump administration, a future American administration. There's certainly huge ruptures right now between Israel and the European Union. All right, Instagram. And this was the first report I saw regarding the situation which took place last night. Of course, it's now all over the media. The people in the Messianic community have also been talking. This is from Stand With Us. Breaking. 2 Israeli embassy staff members have been brutally murdered in an anti-Semitic shooting outside the Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C. According to reports, the suspected shooter shouted, "Free Palestine," during his arrest. So more is coming out regarding who these 2 people were. In fact, there's been a report that at least one of them was a Messianic Jew. Likewise, who was this person who was radicalized? It was somebody who was American. We're getting, we'll see more information come out certainly over the next few days. We don't want to come to any quick judgments, but we know that anti-Semitism is on the rise, anti-Zionism is on the rise, and people can get radicalized to the point where they do very, very, not just stupid things, you know, vandalizing national monuments, tearing down this or that, but even committing acts of murder. And yeah, we will continue to wait and see. We do pray for a resolution of this Middle East situation, but we know we are living in increasingly more violent times, and it affects Jewish people for certain, and it affects those who are directly associated with Jewish people. You know, on our social media feeds, especially on YouTube, when we send out we post the different shorts from these episodes, we'll get people commenting, you know, "Free Palestine," or "From the river to the sea." We'll get people posting from the alt-left as well as from the alt-right. So this is a real thing that we have to be aware of and reckon with. All right, another story from Charisma. This is from earlier today. Will the Golden Dome shield us, or is it already too late? Okay, so you know about the Golden Dome. We discussed this yesterday. The plans to, just like the state of Israel has its Iron Dome designed to shoot down any rockets or missiles which are targeted at it. This Golden Dome proposed by President Trump is supposed to cover all of North America and similarly be able to shoot down any missiles which hit North America. And it wouldn't just affect the United States, it would also affect Canada as well. When I see Trump talking about Golden Age, Golden Dome, I am inclined today to think of it more along the lines of it being involved with wanting to restore fiscal responsibility, pay down the debt, prosperity, but also American security, whether that is with the immigration challenge or with something like this, Golden Dome. Now, if you look through this article, you will see that this is written by someone who holds to a pre-tribulation rapture. He says, "I'm all in for them building a Golden Dome to protect us," he said, but through a biblical lens, he believes the world is far too close to the return of Christ for such long-term plans to unfold. When I see all the signs that have converged as we wait for this pre-tribulation rapture, I don't see the golden dome, and I definitely don't see the golden age. Okay. I'm not a pre-tribulationist, and look, if the golden dome doesn't come about, and then one day I wake up and I see two bright flashes, and okay, it's time to confess those final sins because soon you'll be in the presence of the King of Kings. That's what happens. But I do think that we're likely to enter into some kind of a period of peace and safety, peace and security, peace and prosperity. But it'll be interesting to see if the golden dome is able to actually materialize. Okay, and then our final story. This is from Open Source Intel. I saw this right as I was getting everything put together for today. This is a huge shock. Not really. The Free Palestine movement is a danger to American Jews. We knew this. Now we all know this. And indeed, if you are a part, certainly, of a Messianic congregation or synagogue, and you do not have regular discussions about what is happening in the world, what has been happening since October the 7th, 2023, what are you doing? I understand that there are reasons for us to be afraid. There are reasons for us to be concerned, but if you don't discuss things and you put them off to the side like they don't exist, how are you going to know how to respond accordingly? There are certainly Messianic people who are discussing it. They discuss it every week. They may not discuss it to the extent we're doing with a 5 times a week podcast, but they're discussing it. People are going to be discussing the 2 murders which took place in Washington, D.C. They're going to talk about it, and they're going to recite Kaddish in memory of the dead. Likewise, there are other things we need to be aware of, and we need to stay focused, because if we don't discuss them, we won't know how to respond properly and have that level head. One of the things I'm working through right now, because some of you all know that my work schedule is like a high school schedule. I do 6 to 7 things every day. And I'm still working on the combined When Will the Messiah Return? Dangers of Pre-Tribulationism volume. Yeah, I wish it would have been ready by now, but there were some things which I didn't think about adding to it, which I have to add to it. And so one of them is my presentation from last year's Messiah Conference, Messiah 2024, Approaching the End Times with a Level Head. And so much of it is having to sort through these uncomfortable things. And I can tell you now, a year later, everything I said pretty much, while you would think it's time sensitive, it's still just as relevant now. And along with that, not enough people have bothered to talk about it. Now, is it because we're just, dragged down by some of the mundane issues of congregational life, family life, our individual lives, or are people trying to avoid these things? Everyone has to sort through different matters on their own, I guess. And I suppose because of my own nature, somebody trained not just in theology, but also political science, I want to know what's going on, and I want to be able to help people who need that voice of reassurance so they can be calm and level-headed. Because unfortunately, as we do get closer and closer to the Messiah's return, one of the things which is going to come along with that is increased fear, increased paranoia, increased confusion. And yet, how many of us could have stopped a lot of the fear, paranoia, and confusion during the period of calm? One of the reasons we have this Messianic Insider 5 times a week is so we can have this ongoing conversation about what is taking place, both in theology, but also in the news. And each day brings a new challenge, brings a new topic or subject to be discussed. As always, on behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and donations toward all of our ministry efforts. You can give online at outreachisrael.net/support. We'll see you again tomorrow with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you, shalom, and take care.